Video is based on a concept called automatic stabilisers, and it's related to government policy and how it automatically adjusts based on the economic cycle. So let's imagine we pick a point of the economic cycle. Let's look at a negative output gap. So during a negative output gap, let's say that there's 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. Well, automatically, the policies that have already been implemented will adjust based on what is happening in the economy and economic activity. So we can imagine during a negative output gap, you'll have high levels of unemployment and you'll have cyclical unemployment. And there's going to be less economic activity. So instantly that's going to impact tax receipts and it's going to impact government expenditure. So for example, when we think about the current COVID situation, and let's imagine that there's been no discretionary fiscal policy at this moment in time. So what I mean by that is the government haven't further intervened and they haven't changed any policies. They're just focusing on their current policies that have already been in place. So let's imagine that nothing else has happened and we look at tax receipts. Now, because there's high levels of cyclical unemployment during a recession, as there is at this moment in time, you're going to have less people working. And with less people working, they're not going to be paying the direct tax, such as income tax or national insurance. But also, if there's less people working or more people worried about their job security, then they're not going to be consuming as much. And therefore, if they're not consuming as much, then VAT is also going to fall because you're not going to be buying the goods or the services that VAT is charged on. And also, another example could be if there's less economic activity and you've got companies that are not able to operate. So certainly during this lockdown, you've got restaurants that have had to shut down. And I know this is a bit of an extreme example, but even during, let's say, the Great Recession, when we had companies that were just not seeing the demand that they were used to, then obviously they're not going to be generating the profits because they're not getting the turnover. And if they're not getting those profits, then the corporation tax is also going to fall for the government. So in all of those examples, what we're going to see is a reduction in tax receipts, and therefore we're going to see tax revenue fall. Now, that's not because the government has changed their tax policy. It's not because they've changed, for example, the tax brackets and income tax. It is simply to do with their current tax policy just adapting and adjusting for what's happening in the economic cycle. Now, if we think about government expenditure, and I've already mentioned that cyclical unemployment is going to be high during a recession, and if we think about at the moment with obviously the statistics on the slide, there's high levels of cyclical unemployment, as you'd expect, and they're going to therefore flow onto the claimant count. And if they flow onto the claimant count, then they're obviously going to get universal credits as welfare support. Now, again, the government, they've not changed the universal credits policy. It's just that they've got more people now claiming because they're out of work. So straight away, government expenditure is going to rise based on that. Also, what you have, unfortunately, during a recession is you've got great social problems. So there might be more people, I suppose, demanding support in some ways. And again, it could be in the universal credits. It could be in terms of mental health and more people needing to seek support with mental health. It could be to do with homeless and again requiring more help because they're obviously struggling for that income and they're needing to maybe access more government support systems. There could be a range of different factors, but I suppose the more that they claim from the government, that government expenditure is going to rise. So what we've got is a situation where during this negative output gap, tax receipts have gone down, but government expenditure has risen, and that in itself is an expansionary fiscal policy, but it's done automatically. It's not done by discretionary policies and new policies that have come in. Now, will they always work? It really does depend on the rate of the economy in terms of its decline. If the negative output gap is very, very severe, like we've got with the Great Recession and now with COVID, then automatic stabilisers is not going to be enough, all right? And therefore, the government will have to intervene and they'll have to carry out those discretionary policies. But let's say if the economy is just taking a slight dip, then hopefully it'd be enough to kind of get it back. But in doing so anyway, even if it is severe, it does relieve a little bit of the pressure on the government and it allows the government a little bit more time to kind of plan what their discretionary policies are going to be.